SpectreVision Radio.
Welcome to Earth, a Love Story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter, and I'm excited to announce that Dr. Carrie Murphy and I are opening small group coaching containers called Golden Threads. Have you noticed the world is getting weirder and wilder, and you're having to navigate whole new levels of complexity? Are you trying to keep your heart open to the promise of a better future for humanity while not turning away from the challenges we face? Us too. And for years, we've been finding ground in the groundless and cultivating strategies to navigate complexity with self-care, courageous compassion, and ethics. Join us for a 6-session coaching container to uncover your unique thread of sense-making, wisdom, agency, and inner knowing. Carrie brings grounded clarity from ancient Eastern wisdom traditions, and I share a bunch of stuff NHI taught me. These spaces will be capped at 8 participants, and there are a few spots left for our first go-round. If you're interested, email me at earthalovestory@gmail.com to get on the waiting list. It's going to be a good time. Hello, welcome, and welcome to all of the new subscribers. It's great to have you here. And for you new folks, I want to let you know that my entire audiobook, also titled Earth, a Love Story, is available for free for a little while longer as the first 15 episodes of this podcast. And because of the new folks, and because I'm newly landed on the SpectreVision Radio platform, I'm going to do a little reintroduction before I get to the meat of this episode. Who am I? How do I make sense of anomalous experience? What do I believe it points to, and how does it shape our inner and outer lives? I'm a lifelong experiencer of the anomalous and otherworldly, the edge worlds and weird worlds. I've had contact with NHI and craft, had precognitive dreams, traveled out of body many times, and generally inhabit a landscape that is somewhere between profound and absurd. And you can hear all about those experiences in my book. I've spent most of my life compartmentalizing these experiences and trying to be a normal human while fooling no one. And I'm not special, of course. Every human is a full, multidimensional, many-bodied being capable of cultivating these experiences or already having them to varying degrees. And when I came into the experiencer world, when I found others who'd had experiences like mine, I was greeted with something simple and incredibly profound: belief. Most experiencers I know are skeptics. They are skeptical even of their own experiences, and that was my journey. But because I landed in communities who both took lightly and held seriously the landscape of the anomalous, who were able to hold the paradox of all the ways the phenomenon tends to express, I was able to avoid having to prove the objective truth of my experiences. Which, spoiler, I can't. Instead, I was invited to explore the mystery, to discover how my own interiority, psyche, and direct perception were shaped by the relationship with these beings and worlds. So this podcast is in many ways about that. I believe myself, and you. I hold experiences lightly and take them seriously, acknowledging their subjectivity and existence across all realms of consciousness, including waking, sleeping, dreaming, the astral, and more. And from that framework of believing ourselves and each other about these extraordinary events, I explore how these events, how the UFO, capital and small d disclosure, and more interact with the deeply personal and with the larger cultural moment we find ourselves situated in. I look to our history, to the things we've left behind or forgotten as guides and teachers for where we find ourselves now. I look at the archetypal forces that shape us over long stretches of time and how emerging archetypes and mythos are inviting us to cross a threshold into a new future. I don't think we can do it without recovering essential parts of our humanity. Parts like rites of passage, ritual, story and song, connection to nature and each other in ways we have known in our bones for thousands of years. And right now, because of the times we find ourselves in where the shocks come so fast and steady they almost cease to be shocking, I'm particularly interested in the nature of rupture and trauma and how we relate to it. Trauma is a buzzword in our culture and has been for a decade or more, and for good reason. But trauma is not new to the human experience. What is new is the lack of a cultural or mythic container to process and address that trauma. Once upon a time, we had rituals and stories and offerings to help us collectively stomach and digest and excrete and compost the inevitability of rupture. Now we have processes that, while helpful, place much of the burden of that carrying and composting onto a single set of shoulders. Trauma is common. Rupture is regular and expected. We break apart and come together, and we've survived it because of a collective container large enough to hold the breaking. There's an ecosystem we exist within that has always held the breaking apart and coming together. We've both lost access to that ecosystem within our culture, and at the same time, it hasn't gone anywhere. It remains immediately available to us. We can look right out our windows to the humus under the trees in the forest. The seasons show us every year that we can die and not die. The paradox of the birth-death dance is all around us. Nature herself is not safe, but rather red in tooth and claw, as Tennyson wrote. How do we reorient around trauma and safety to be able to bear the cycles and become as generative and abundant as good soil? When held in a large enough container, trauma and rupture teach us about the cycles of initiation. The breach, descent, death, resurrection, and return. And when all of this is overlaid on top of the ontological shattering that comes with contact events, we find a map of how to integrate rupture and repair into our physical and spiritual lives. How death is natural, how birth arrives always, just in the nick of time, and how all of this gives us an opportunity to return and serve the ecosystem. Many experiencers will tell you stories of their contact events, which include both trauma and transcendence in equal measure. Being taken out of my body and shown images of devastation and Armageddon, and being told to do something about it at 4 years old, was traumatic. My body and psyche experienced a rupture, and what came rushing in that opening affected my life for decades and still affects how I view the world in both fruitful and challenging ways. These ruptures became both rooted in my body as hypervigilance, overwhelm, and terror, and were richly generative, creatively, psychically, and spiritually. How does the wound become the medicine? What is this experience of being torn apart and coming back together that lends itself to a sort of impersonal and unflinching, driving evolution? How do these other worlds and the otherworldly tear into our psyches and bring us revelation and madness and return? What is this force that reaches through from the unseen realms and penetrates humanity, that brings us shattering growth and evolution? Not clean, neat, easy, but absurd, costly, painful, and yet ultimately valuable. It's possible to engage with these experiences directly and become not just the wounded, the ruptured, but the wounded healer, the one who is broken open and life pours through. We fly apart and come together, and without bypassing the harm and impact, without pretending it's not soaked with suffering, without excusing fuckery and erasing accountability, I'm looking at the function itself, and particularly how it operates when paired with the other worlds and edge worlds and those who have been touched by the realms and beings who inhabit them. From Tom Cohen's book, Fire in the Head, which is full of stories that today we might categorize as experiencer accounts, highly recommended, by the way, there is a story of Biddy Early, who lived in the 19th century. Her brother died, and she sat beneath a tree to cry every day for a year after his death. He then, quote, brought her under, meaning he took her into the other world where he gave her knowledge of curing. Neighbors claimed Biddy Early was taken to the spirit realm for 7 years, a common length of time for fairy abductions. At some point in her life, Biddy began seeing illness and its cures, along with future events. There is the trauma and rupture of death. Biddy is taken across the threshold into another world, and through these ruptures, special knowledge is given. She returns, develops the capacity to heal and see the future, and serves her community. There's the story of an Irish nobleman named Fercy who set up a monastery in England in the 8th century. At one point in his life, he fell sick and, quote, quitting his body from the evening till the cock crew, was lifted up on high by the angels that conducted him. From the celestial heights, he had a vision of the wickedness of the world, his 3 angelic conductors showing him enormous bonfires, hideous devils, terrifying bouts of spiritual warfare between good and evil spirits, and other typical medieval Christian scenarios. On this journey, an unclean spirit threw at Fercy the body of a man whom they tormented in the fire. The flaming human projectile scorched Fercy's shoulder and jaw, leaving a visible burn mark on his physical body. Throughout the rest of his life, Cohen writes, he bore the mark of the fire which he had felt in his soul. According to Cohen, Fercy seems to have relished his reputation as a wounded healer. Before his helping angels returned him to his body, they gave him wholesome advice for what ought to be done towards the salvation of such as repented on their deathbed. Thus, Fercy received classic shamanic training in death counseling and later served in the role of psychopomp, a person who leads the souls of the dying into the next world. How helpful these angels are, showing Fercy hideous devils, spiritual warfare, and enormous bonfires. They literally threw a dude on fire at him, leaving him with lasting scars, rupture, trauma, and wholesome advice. He became a death doula and psychopomp. I imagine more than a few experiencers are nodding in recognition. A lot of us become death doulas. If you've heard the story of Ra Uru Hu, the creator of the human design system, you've heard a similar account. Born Alan Karkauer, Ra abruptly left his life as an ad exec and moved to Spain. He describes his experience as one of madness, when in 1987 he had an 8-day mystical encounter with a superior intelligence he called the Voice, which asked him, "Are you ready to work?" and then transmitted the mechanics of the human design system in what Ra reported as a terrifying, blinding encounter with advanced non-physical intelligence. His account goes on to report the Voice telling him to summon his friend, that he was going to give his friend a gift, but instead a white light floated out of his friend's ear and entered the top of Ra's own head. His friend began vomiting violently, and at the Voice's behest, Ra threw him out the door and into the street. His friend ended up being institutionalized for several years and never forgave him for stealing his ajna, the energy center that sits at the third eye. So this contact thing, The unseen, unknown, and unknowable intelligence reaching into a person's life and giving them a download, a vision, a message, a gift, is not a clean, transcendent bliss. It can be violent, wrenching, and rupturing. These stories of encounters show us that the experience doesn't care for logic, ethics, or safety. "Be not afraid," the angels shout at us while they impregnate us against our will with knowledge or child or vision or mission. Revelation, contact events, downloads, being pulled out of body and given a vision, near-death experiences. These are, by their very definition, rupturing events. And yet, paradoxically, they contain seeds of evolution, growth, guidance, and goodness. Some kind of gift or knowledge that can potentially serve the experiencer and the collective. In the face of these paradoxical events, what is an experiencer to do? On a broader scale, how can a culture that is being given disclosure and having more and more anomalous experiences, as well as many prosaic ruptures across our understanding of how reality behaves, make sense of itself? If trauma and rupture and flying apart and coming together, if cycles and seasons and life and death and birth and around again are a natural part of nature and our humanity, resilience must also be built into the system to bear these endless initiations. Particularly in these liminal times, in the crossing over, in the betwixt and betweens, the bardos, in between one iteration of ourselves and the next, we must turn towards the larger structures that once held us through the breaking and becoming new. In the overculture, we are impoverished of the stories and songs and rituals that could hold us through these initiations. We are disconnected from nature and the earth. As we are tasked with navigating extraordinary times, we must tell new guiding stories. We must create a new mythology to hold us as we cross this threshold into who we are capable of becoming. As I see it, there are two very large mythologies forming right now. One is that we will become transhuman in the way where we transcend our bodies and nature through the integration of biology and technology. We will strive to extend, enhance, and transform our capacities. We will attempt to self-direct our evolution through AI and virtual reality, liberating ourselves from biological constraints, including the very natural cycles of life and death. We seek to transcend even our planet Earth, leaving behind the wounds we inflicted and could not heal, and reaching for some sort of clean, metallic, manageable techno-utopia. In a half-vision daydream, the words "Prometheus awakens" blazed into my mind, and I understood it to be the modern moment of stealing fire not from the gods, but from the unleashed creativity of our own minds. We are ourselves godlike in our ability to construct worlds beyond the chaos of nature, red in tooth and claw, and full of the hubris of an adolescent apprentice biting off more than he can chew and creating a darker kind of chaos in the sorcerer's chambers. And of course, the lie at the heart of it all, the one that says we actually can escape grief and death and the great mystery, the one that says this is all we get. There is no greater spiritual structure or home to hold us, so we are concretizing the metaphor, the most dangerous move of all, literalizing the subtle. The second mythology is of us gathering in the parts we've left behind, gathering back in our rituals and songs and stories, our orientation to nature and our place in it, our smallness and power in equal measure, situated in modernity with our gifts of reason and technological creativity deeply intact. It is a mythos of stewardship and care, of adolescence growing into maturity and seeing that we are all one thing, and when one of us suffers, we all suffer. It is a mythology of bearing the breaches and ruptures, not trying to leave behind our fragility and humanity, but integrating them into a larger picture of who we are, using our world-building capacities and technologies to be ultimately in service to the earth and her children. It is a return to the ordinariness of existence as more than enough. Simple joys and pleasures, losses and challenges, wild disintegration into the mystery, rinse and repeat. We humans are more than enough if we include the interiority and absurdity and the everyday and our hearts. The first myth is quite seductive. I'm glued to my screen much more often than I'd care to admit. The promise of order and cleanliness, smooth edges and right angles to defy and deny the madness of nature and her unflinching exactitude, to push away those ruptures that will inevitably come because they are part of the fabric of our being, is attractive. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Our rationality, our technology, our comfortable lives are hard-won. But if they are held outside of the deep nature of who we are and how we are, if they are seeking to transcend the inevitability of rupture and revelation, of nature and death, we end up impoverished in luxury, floating comfortably in a dearth of meaning and ecology. And our souls, our long selves, our spiritual selves, bear the cost. It's clean and cultivated, but God boring, dark, hopeless, and dangerous. Give me the rupture and exaltation and aliveness and mystery any day. Give me the alternative full of nonsense and paradox and deep care and good vital danger, the mythos that makes more sense in poetry than logic, blended with the best of our rationality and technology. Oh, my heart, and oh, my belly, and oh, my bones, that is the future I want, so I will put myself in service to it. And integrating and accepting the reality of rupture and trauma as part of who we are feels like the doorway. Grounding is hard when touching the earth feels like wild grief. The drought, the land, the fires, the heat. The earth calls me home, not done with my grieving body. I emerge from the Zoom meditation, the ring light, a dumb, false sun. The absurdity of this disconnection, and the longing to be situated again in the heart of the matter. Or, as Tennyson said, I falter where I firmly trod, and falling with my weight of cares upon the great world's altar stairs, that slope through darkness up to God. I stretch lame hands of faith and grope, and gather dust and chafe and call to what I feel is Lord of all, and faintly trust the larger hope. If you'd like to learn more about my work, or to book a one-on-one session with me, please visit robinlassiter.com.